So today we are joined by my hero, if you don't mind me
You're
saying,
welcome.
Mark.
Sure.
Uh, I am such a big fan, and it's such an honor to meet you. And I'm so happy that you're here, willing to spend the time with me and our students. So thank you very much. Thank
Well,
you.
ask ahead.
I know
Go
how
ahead.
busy you are, and you know how in demand you are as a director. So thank you very much for helping us out here. Oh, and by the way, a small little detail. I don't know if this means anything, but we're both wearing the same clothes. I mean, that's kind of like a really weird coincidence, don't you think? It's kind of cool. All right.
Sure.
I have a whole bunch of questions sent to us by our viewers
I'm happy
that
to
I'd
help
like
out.
to ask you about your masterpiece of horror, of terror,
Sure.
Kristen. Yeah, if you don't mind.
Anything to help.
Yeah. All right. So Marta would like to ask. So what was the budget of the movie? Well, actually, it was only 7,000 euros, which I paid from having been able to sell the video store that I used to own. I knew quite a lot, and I know some people in the industry, some actors and crew, who helped me on previous projects. And so I asked them to work for free. That's the only reason to be able to do this for this small amount of money. I wrote something that could be filmed in quite a short amount of days. So, you know, you're not asking people to sacrifice months out of their life for nothing. You know, the budget. So the budget was 7,000 euros. Interesting. All right. So next question. Petri would like to ask, were you inspired by Silence of the Lambs, particularly with the dark scene, and Insidious, the scene with the lamp in the basement full of ghouls? I have to say, Silence of the Lambs, not so much, as much as I love the film. Insidious, it's kind of like a disappointing story because, believe it or not, I was writing the script and I had this idea for an ending where, you know, like what would the afterlife be like, where we all go to die. I thought, well, that would be darkness, like eternal darkness and emptiness, where people would, you know, slowly turn into dust. Uh, and that was very fitting for my story. And then, because this was quite a while back, I saw the first Insidious movie that sort of had a lot of similarities to that idea. And I just had my doubts about shall I be able to, um, do I keep it? Because, some people might say that I stole from it, although I didn't. Um, or do I change it? And I thought about like what alternatives do I have, but there weren't any because this was the best fitting idea for the film. So I decided to keep it, even though that whole ending does have a lot of similarities to the ending idea and the ending world of Insidious. Cool. All right. Next question. Madeleine would like to ask, can you explain the meaning behind the ending? It's what everybody really wants to know every time, I'm sure. Does she feel guilty towards God for the abortion, or is there something she must confess to release the guilt? Can you explain more of that and the religious part? Yes, so the ending, well, the ending is the question I get asked the most. It's what frustrates, I think, the most people if they do find the movie frustrating. It's mostly the ending and its lack of explaining like what it actually is trying to say. It's also the thing that was the hardest thing to write. It took me the most amount of time to come up with this ending because it's um, the trick is I wanted to make a horror movie with an ending that is closest to the endings that I like the most. It's the kind of ending that sticks with you, that you remember, that that what truly is scary to me are not endings that have a ribbon wrapped around it and are perfectly neat and tight and done and finished and you know but there's something, although it's not an open ending, it's an ending that makes you think and makes you question and makes you go, Jesus, what did that mean? And sounds a bit pretentious, don't you think? That would feel correct, yet haunt you, hopefully. So my idea actually is there are three ways probably to look at the ending. One is Kristen didn't escape, and she's actually still in the darkness, and her awakening in the bar was just a trick by the god, demon, devil figure to mess with her even more. Or she did come out of the dark death, you know, that whole place. Um, but God isn't finished with her yet in punishing her or testing her. So, like, the God figure will now take her love, Ivan, or, and this is more the thought that I had personally, it's more of a metaphorical ending because again, like true horror should be about deeper thoughts, or at least was my idea behind this. And so basically, what I thought, well, I'm going to make a movie that's about nihilism, that is about there is no life after death, not even a bad one. It's the emptiness, the blackness, the nothingness that exists beyond. Outside of this small piece of light that is life, surrounded by that is the nothingness, the emptiness, the darkness. So that is sort of, for me personally, what that end shot represents. All right. That although she's still alive, death and the emptiness of that will still be there waiting for her. It was always my thought that, okay, if you want to do a horror movie, do a horror movie that, although it's entertaining and seems to be on a surface level about, a young woman trying to escape a bad guy, a bad character, an antagonist, there is a deeper layer behind it, and it has to do with real nihilism. So that was sort of the idea about that, at least that I had about the ending. Now, to the degree to which a viewer will feel that, I don't know. I hope somehow they do, but that's an impossible thing to tell. Well, if you say so. Okay, and next question. Elijah would like to ask you, how did you make that really cool 360-degree shot around the 28-minute mark? I mean, that looked great. So how did you do that shot? Well, that was really cool. I thought so too. And well, first it started with, all right, so we need something that represents, that visualizes her shock. It's the moment where she completely loses her grip on reality, and that should also be shown in like the visuals. So, there are multiple ways we could do it, but one that I talked to the cameraman about was like, I had this concept that as soon as the hand grabs through the thing and she runs back in, like everything is changing, and there's no, like, she's not grounded, like everything is like twirling around her, and she's like having a panic attack. So I thought, well, how to do that? Like, what if we would, because there were hooks on the ceiling of the bar, what if we have like a rope with like a metal fixture underneath, two ropes and a metal fixture underneath, and a camera, and we have that thing perfectly balanced, and we swirl it around so it'll go in circles, and we have Terence, the actress, walk in, step inside that circle of that swirling camera, and then step out. Really, and she just like stepped inside the. That way, visually, it will feel, as it did in the film, as though the whole world is spinning around her, which, of course, is also the way she feels at that moment. So that's how we did that 360 shot. So it was with sort of bungee type ropes from that were hung from the ceiling. Wow, that's so cool. Wow, I remember that shot as well. Good question. All right, next question. Edgars would like to ask, how long did it take you to write this script, and how many drafts did you have? Yeah, well, it actually just took about 3 months or so to write the script, so not very long. I think I had 3 to 4 versions before actually going into shooting. I had 3 months of writing it by myself. Then I did some rehearsal with the actors, which always changes things, specifically dialogue. Yeah, so I did another polish after that, and then we were able to shoot it. Interesting. All right, so not that long. Okay. Um, I have a question from Olivia. Olivia wanted to ask you, how long did it take to film Kristen? So the entire film, because she noticed it all took place in a restaurant. So she assumes it was all done on location. And how did this influence the pre-production and the production process? Yeah. So one of the ways to shoot a movie really low budget, and to, of course, by making it low budget, the only way to do it is to not pay people. The only way to get good people without paying them is if you only ask them to help you out for a short period of time. So it's also why I wrote the movie with the story that it has, because I knew I could record this in a relatively short amount of time. The actual amount of recording days, if I remember correctly, were 15 in the bar. And those days started at 7 o'clock in the morning, and we had to be finished by 3 o'clock in the afternoon because the bar would open at 4, 7 days a week. So we never had longer than from 7 till 3 in the afternoon. Um, and by the way, we put like big curtains outside to make it appear dark, but it was recorded during the daytime. And we had one really long studio day for the climax when she goes inside that black space. That was one really long, almost 24-hour studio shoot. So I would say then in total that would mean about 16 shooting days. Again, very interesting. Good question. All right, I have a next question for you from Maud. Um, Apparently, her teacher often talks about having a main character that has a bond with an animal. So we like them and empathize with them. I'm sure you mean petting the dog, right? Yeah, petting the dog. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Like Maud wants to know, is that the reason you gave Kristen a cat? Yeah, no, but the cat, I needed something to die. Like what I had one major problem. Um, like a horror movie, to have the proper amount of suspense, there needs to be mortal danger. But I only had one person in the bar, and I couldn't kill her in like any time soon. So how do I show through blood, really, something dying, that the threat outside was really dangerous? So that's where the cat came in. Like I needed the cat to be there for me to kill it, to make the threat that's waiting for her on the outside tangible. Otherwise, it would have just been a voice, but now it actually killed something. And, having a cat was the only option I had for that. Uh, Next question. Lyra asks, did you have an idea of how the actors would look like before you casted them? Or did you choose them according to their acting skills in connection to the horror genre? All right, so actors. Well, I knew Trense, the main actress, from multiple projects that I did before. We are still very close friends, and I had always been a huge fan of her, and always felt that she was never able to show her talent. Like she's done like really good parts in a lot of things, but never stuff that I felt could show her true potential. So the first thing I did when developing this script was going to her and say, well, I want you to be in this film. I don't know what this film will be about, but I'm writing this for you, and I'm going to give you really cool stuff to do. So Terence was already there from the beginning, sure. I had the location. It's what I just talked to you about. It's like I live above the location, and I knew I could film there, and it was a perfect setting that didn't need a lot of art direction, because the way it looks in the movie is actually the way it looks in real life, without the jukebox, which I own, and I had that brought down as a prop. So I had the actress, I had the bar, and then the third thing that I had that I needed before being able to write the script was I needed the idea of the antagonist. And I am a big YouTube addict, also, not just a movie addict, but also a YouTube addict. And there was this guy, unfortunately, has died. He has died a few years ago, but like there was this really inspirational guy called Christopher Hitchens who wrote a book, God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything. Not a very subtle title, but all right. All right. Um, but I listened to one of his lectures where he said, well, if you were to just look at God specifically in the Old Testament, um, like how horrible a figure that actually is. Like you need to worship God and you can't have other gods, and you do this wrong, he'll punish you, that wrong, he'll punish you. He'll send you to a place to burn and torture forever, but he loves you. Like that sounds like a crazy person to him. And I thought, well, there you go. Look, it's really hard to think of something original as a bad guy for a horror movie, but to do that version of God, to at least try to do that version of God. As soon as I had that, like then I had the three elements needed to start writing this film. Cool. All right. Next question. Anissa wants to ask you, how different was what you originally envisioned the film being like, and how it eventually turned out. So, how different was your original idea to the finished product? So, I don't actually remember. It was like the script develops along the way, and during shooting and during editing. Honestly, I don't quite remember what my initial idea was for the movie. I'm really proud of it. Like anything that I've ever made, the cliche is true. They do feel very close to me. I don't want to say that they're my babies, but like they are. Okay, you know, I can't be very strict with things that I've made. It's impossible for me to really critically be harsh towards them because there was too much love involved in creating them. So I find that very difficult to do. But I also, again, like I don't remember my initial vision and how different the outcome was compared to that. Mina wants to ask, uh, what was the meaning behind the alien-like person close to the end when Kristen kissed it? Yeah, so the kiss. All right. Well, that was a really hard one because it was the one thing in the script that the actress Terence actually didn't buy, didn't believe, didn't want to do because she was like, "Why on earth would I kiss this thing that has been such a threat, that has terrorized me, that has been so awful?" And I honestly couldn't explain it to her. That was the only thing in the script that I did on gut instinct. I just had this thought where, like, in the version we had that I had of the script before we shot it, like the ending was she grabs the knife that she has hidden in like behind her, the extra knife that the God figure doesn't know about, and she stabs him in the stomach, or she stabs him and she runs away and she falls in like dark water and she's sucked down by demons, and she's trying to gasp for air, and then she wakes up in the basement. And I thought, well, yeah, but you can't kill God. You can't destroy God. You can't outsmart God. Like God is everything. God is everywhere. God knows, like is omniscient and omnipresent. And so it doesn't make any sense to have like it felt wrong, that kind of cliche, like stabbing the bad guy and having a clever plan. So I thought, well, the only way that, like, because I knew God would have to let her go, because if she can't outsmart God in that way, in a violent way, like, I knew God would still have to let her go. Now, what could Kristen do that was so different than all other people before her in that situation that would make the God figure go, okay, I'm letting you go for now. I'm letting you go. and God tests people. That was the whole idea. He like, where's your breaking point? I will push you to your breaking point, and then I will punish you for your sins, and I will take your life. So he pushes everyone, and he pushes Kristen. He pushes her in the confrontation of stuff from her past, and he pushes her like showing her the horrible stuff that might have happened to her mother, like where she turns into dust, and like he shocks her with all kinds of things. Um, but finally, she decides to like not choose fear or not choose hate, but in some strange way choose love or acceptance to some degree. That was at least my thought behind it, and also what I tried to explain to Teresa and made her finally go, well, I still don't quite get it, but if you want me to do it, I'll do it. I think it's a beautiful poetic moment, but it's also one of those moments that I hear from people quite often where they say, well, that was an amazing moment, or it was really odd or weird or mesmerizing, even. I remember someone saying, but not a lot of people quite understand why. Like, and well, I do understand. I do understand your question. All right. Sol wants to ask, well, why do all these things happen to Kristen? And what makes you decide she should suffer in this way? Is there any explanation as to why this happens to her? Well, it's a horror movie, and bad things need to happen to your main character, otherwise, there's no horror movie. One of the most shocking reviews that I've ever read, which really, believe me, this was never, ever my intention, was a review of someone who saw the movie and thought that it was condoning, or yeah, condoning punishment for abortions, as though I'm so anti-abortion that this is a movie about me being, from that perspective, and that was so never not the intention. Like no, like the way that whole thing crept into the film was only like I needed on the phone call that where like on minute I think it was like minute 20 or 15 to 20, somewhere right there. There's this phone call where she is confronted by this person on the other side who knows this huge secret about her. That was it. That was just the only thing that needed to happen. And I thought, okay, well, what's a really hard hitting secret that this other person might know about? And I thought, well, what if she had an abortion, like in secret? And like, who could possibly know that? And that would be so shocking to hear. That was it. And there was no real other mention about that whole abortion thing in the script other than just that one scene. And then in the mixing and sound design phase, like little elements seem to work and fall into place, like the ending, just like the little child voice just before the kiss at the end, for instance. And there are other things like children playing and the opening song of a child voice there. That whole thing about like the children's theme sort of found its way into the film, but it was never meant as some sort of really deeper meaning, uh, like a statement against abortion or something, or it was no, that was never the intention, no. And I do have to say, as to the question of why do these things happen to Kristen, it's actually, again, this thought about, well, God will take people, or death will take people at random, like life is random. So she's just chosen for a reason to be the one to die, basically. And in that moment of death, like time doesn't exist anymore, so time stops, and in that like short period of eternity, really, um, every person, in this case Kristen, is tested by this God figure who's both God and the devil, sort of in one. um, and she goes through these perils, this testing of where is her breaking point. Like life will, test you in that way. Kristen is tested in the movie, so that's why these things happen to her, really. And again, because it's also a horror movie, You want bad things to happen to your lead character. Getting close to the final questions. Elsie wants to ask: were all in interior? She says internal, but I'm sure she means interior shots. Shot in chronological order. If not, how did you decide on the order to shoot them in, and how many days of shooting were there in total? Didn't we have that already? I don't think so. All right. So please. Well, the movie was shot mostly in chronological order. It was shot in chronological order in like the main bar setting and in the kitchen area and in the hallway setting, because it still took a lot of time to light those places. So we had like a whole bunch of days where we only shot in chronological order all the things that happened in the kitchen and then all the chronological things that happened in the bar, um, and in the basement. The few times we're in the basement. So yeah, to a degree, because we only had those few locations, we shot things almost all in chronological order because we didn't have any location to, that would cause problems that we could only use for a short period of time. We just had this one location and we hardly had any actors. So, you're also not dealing with busy schedules, like acting schedules. All right. Again, interesting. Good to know this. This is so interesting. All right. Dev would like to ask, where did you get the inspiration? Oh, this is a big one. So, where did you find the inspiration for this movie? Did you use any other movies or songs or ideas? Like, how did you come up with this crazy idea of like the God and the thing with the bar? Like, the one thing that I didn't just mention because I mentioned Terence, the bar, and this idea of God being the antagonist. The only thing that I didn't talk about, which was even before those three elements, was the idea of doing a horror movie because I love movies. That seems to be pretty clear. I think. But the kind of movies that I still, but mainly used to love the most, specifically in my teens, were horror movies. My love is huge for all genres, but I have a particular extra love uh, with horror movies, and it has to do with basically two things. One, it's being well, it's and it, well, basically, and it has to do with I like expressive things. I like expressive paintings. I like expressive music, and horror is, I believe, the most expressive genre. That's also why I think there's so much horrible horror movies out there, um, because I honestly think it's one of the hardest genres to do well because you don't just if you have a good script and you have good actors with a drama, you already will have a good movie. With a horror movie, you're not there yet. For a horror movie to be good, you also need proper lighting and proper pacing and proper framing and proper music and proper storytelling and building to certain jump scares or suspense moments. Um, and it's also that challenge and that purity also because if a horror movie isn't like frightening or suspenseful or scary or gripping, then it sort of failed. So I hope you all had those emotions while watching. If not, like the movie didn't work then if you didn't have that. But it's the purity of that visceral reaction to the movie, and it's the visual storytelling aspect of horror that sort of were at the birth of this film. And after that came the actress, the bar, and the idea of having like this dark god figure as an antagonist. Movie making sounds difficult to me. I don't think that could ever be something that I could do or would want to do really. So last almost final question. Lene wants to ask: is there any significance to the P in help being on one of the windows? Ah, clever. So you noticed the P. Well, let me ask you, if you have help and you take away the P, what's remaining? It's hell. Like one of the ways that I hoped the ending would work with the whole, the God twist was the whole film is filled with stuff like that. Like, I don't know, for the few people who are watching this who are Dutch, what does Christen mean? Well, actually, if I were to translate that into English, Christen would mean Christian. Oh, yes, the name Christen. Uh, so that's a religious thing. All right, so what is Kristen eating at the beginning? Remember? An apple? An apple, yes, like, Eve bit from the apple. All right. So, what about the child song at the beginning? It refers to God. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. It was sort of like the Dutch variation of that very song. Um, and again, also with the like what she hears on the TV when she turns it on, it's like a sermon. Also references to God, like the Christmas organ music at the end, also very religious, and like the whole film is so filled with little elements like that, and hell being also one of them. That hopefully, without you knowing it, you kind of still pick up on some of them, so that when the ending is that moment where like God, she has that realization. You don't go, what the hell? But you kind of go with it, hopefully. That was the thought anyway. Clever. That's why I just adore your work. It's so clever. It's so wow. So well done. Wow. So, final question. Chantal asks, was there a lot of improvisation or sudden changes made to the script on the set? If yes, do you remember what changes were made, and with which scenes, and what was improvised? Um, well, there wasn't a lot of improvisation. It's a really interesting question. Like, what I am a big fan of is rehearsal. Like, you go with the actors, and before you shoot, you go through the script. First, you do like a table read, and you stand and you play around with it, and an actor will tell you this feels wrong, or I don't feel it. Like, there's no logic to it. Like, I don't feel how I should say this, or I don't get why I'm saying this, or why I'm doing this. Um, and then I will try to explain it, and if they still can't get there, don't feel it, then it's completely open to, okay, but how would you say it? That's kind of like my favorite thing to tell, like an actor, like, say it the way you would say it in this situation. And so in rehearsal, I see what they come up with, like how they would like slightly change it, or dramatically change it. I will adapt that into the final version of the script. And then during shooting, we have that to go with. But even then, there's still like there's some freedom to still improvise and overlap, and do it the way that feels natural for them. Um, my whole approach to acting really is they should only say and do the things based on that feels right for them to do in that moment, not because it's written in a script somewhere. I hope you like the acting in the film. It's one of the things that Kristen got an award for best actress in like a Spanish film festival. Um, Not that that means anything, because it's just subjective taste, but still. But should you like the acting, like it's one of the hardest thing to do, because like you try and make a serious Dutch horror film, that's really difficult, because like a lot of things will sound like crazy, like stupid and silly if you do them in Dutch. Um, but if you let actors go, if you give them that kind of trust, if you give them that kind of freedom, I think that sort of tends to result in the best, most natural feeling and believable, um, yeah, the acting performances really. Oh, again, interesting. So, all right. So I know you're a busy person. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us here. Well, you're welcome. It was my pleasure. It was very good for you to help us. Excuse me. Come on, man. Mark, please. It's nothing. It's nothing. It's just nerves. It's just nerves, Mark. Oh, come on.